need to see me anyway. Um, I was able to live with an incredible Anishinaabe Métis family where I learned about tripartite negotiations, treaty history. I got to visit communities, and it was the first time as a kid who grew up in a military household that I had really understood the original people of this land for the first time, started to understand. I was a politically obsessed kid at that same time, so I wanted to know absolutely everything I possibly could in that last year of high school before I moved to Ottawa, the nation's capital. In short order, I had a job with the Minister of Canadian Heritage, where as the Western Desk it's called, or a political assistant responsible for Western Canada, I was also responsible for then what was known as Aboriginal affairs, or all of the files associated with that. And I learned even more about national Indigenous organizations, about the complexities of our country, about the promises that our country had broken. National Indigenous organizations leaders just not hesitate to tell me when I worked for Madam Cops exactly what promises we'd broken. And I started to want to fix them and put them together. I went on to work for Jack Layton. I quickly moved out of government, realizing that perhaps that wasn't the best place for me, that perhaps the change that I wanted to make was more at the grassroots level. I worked closely with Jack and the National Indigenous organizations and the Stephen Harper government on the apology, the ceremony associated with it. And I learned a lot from Jack Layton and folks in Treaty 9 about social justice. Treaty 9, for folks who don't know, is in the Northern Ontario area. I spent a lot of time there, and I often say my heart is still in Treaty 9, because as I went on to create a social enterprise, I worked for countless friendship centers, the Inuit Tuprit Kanatami, and then I had an incredible opportunity to work for Gord Downey and the Wenjack families as they brought the secret path to the country. And then, of course, their foundation, which I'm a huge supporter of still, the Downey Wenjack Foundation. And now at Animikii, I am the Chief Impact and Communications Officer, where I get to bring all of these experiences and skills to a place where we hold truth and reconciliation very close together. We rarely separate those words, truth and reconciliation. First comes truth. And that process of truth is ongoing and ever ongoing. And I want to acknowledge you all for your role in that. Today may be a first step, or it may be one of many steps that you've already taken. We acknowledge your place in the journey. And excitingly, I don't know if you remember, but right at the beginning of that story, there's that Anishinaabe Métis family that brought me in high school. That's our CEO's family, Jeff Ward. So somebody who's super close to me. And even though I was a little bit different, a little bit of a weird queer kid, their family took me in with open arms. That was, I think, one of the biggest and the first lessons that I had in love as it relates to a different way of knowing and being. And our team today is in, literally physically today, in Haida Gwaii, Toronto, Waterloo, all with speaking events, and none of those places are their homes. We're incredibly proud of that. And that's also part of the reason that you're going to be seeing some recordings today. So I don't know, we're not going to fake it. Some of our team have recorded things, and we're also going to highlight some incredible conversations that have happened with others, because we think that's important as well. Let's take a look, perhaps a little bit about what we're going to do together today. We're going to learn a little bit about strategies. We're going to talk a little bit about where we begin all of our projects at Animikii. We're going to hear some perspectives from a very different stage, from a technology stage, on Indigenous digital sovereignty. One of the things that we love to do is bring worlds together, and we really wanted to bring the technology world in a conversation that occurred at a conference, one of the world's largest web conferences or technology conferences, here into this nonprofit space for you to be able to reflect on with us and ask questions about. We're going to chat about our pathfinding process and how we undertake ethical engagement each and every time we build a piece of software for an Indigenous or non-Indigenous community or partner. And we're going to also reveal some of the questions we've asked ourselves inside of our social enterprise as we've sought to decolonize business, recenter new ways of knowing and being within our work. And then we're going to collect some questions for you. And you might be saying, what do you mean by collect some questions? Aren't we supposed to do all of the questions right here and right now? And no, these incredible folks are the folks who are sharing today would like a bit more time, because they're not obviously with us today to be able to answer, but even more so to be able to pull from resources and provide more in-depth responses for each of you. So today we're going to be hearing from Jonathan Forbes and Samantha Tweet, two of our incredible operations managers and longtime Animikii team members, Thunderbirds we call them, which is what Animikii means in Anishinaabe-Moan. These are two exemplary Thunderbirds. I'll let them introduce themselves, but let me just say I've had the absolute and distinct honor of working with both of them as they have brought and shepherded incredible software projects, website projects, and our core flagship product, Niuin, into fruition. And then, as I sort of previewed before, we're going to talk and listen to rather the folks who are talking on the stage at Collision. Now, many nonprofit leaders don't get invited to these technology spaces, and a lot of nonprofit leaders should be in these technology spaces. So I encourage you to attend Collision, but we're going to listen to the first 10 minutes of the panel, and we'll provide you with a link to the rest of it as well, where we hear from Sheila North, Dr. Alika LaFontaine, and our CEO at Animikii about what does Indigenous digital sovereignty mean to them. We'll be able to reflect on that. And then I'll provide a bit of a rundown on some of the policies, practices, and things we've done within Animikii and some of the questions you might want to ask yourselves. And we'll do all of that within your lunch hour. But that isn't where this conversation stops. Like I said, we want to collect your questions. We have a little QR code, there's a link, collect your questions. We're very, very privacy oriented. So we promise the only time we will ever email you back is the response to all of these questions. We'll give a little pitch in there to our newsletter as well, and you can choose to join that or not. We'll leave that in your choice. But for now and throughout tomorrow, Saturday, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and the days afterwards, I want you to keep this handy. So that's why we gave you a little QR code. Pull out that mobile phone, get it into your mobile. If you have a question that pops up when you're out on your walk, when you're reading those calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation report on Saturday morning, like I will be, as I do every single day, every single National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I should say. I don't read the calls to action every single day. I can actually almost recite most of all 94. But I want you to ask questions about those, and we'll put those questions in front of our entire team at Animikii, and we'll provide you with resources, ideas from all different perspectives, from all over Turtle Island. And that leads me to Animikii. What do we do? Well, of course, many people know us as people who've created over 300 incredible websites for Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations. But what we do a lot now is we grow. You know, we've been around almost 20 years, and the past 10 years have seen an incredible amount of growth for this Indigenous technology company. Part of that is Niuin, our flagship product, which we're bringing to market very soon, early November. You're going to hear a lot more about it then. But what drives us is that we're a social enterprise. We view business differently. Part of what drives us is viewing business differently is our social impact statement, which is why we're here with y'all today. I wanted to just highlight these two sections. One, the Truth and Reconciliation movement needs to be supported by skills and resources. That's what we're trying to do here. And two, we believe that investing in technology, and if nonprofits co-invest in technology with Indigenous people, we will see more economic justice, self-sufficiency, and equitable incomes for Indigenous people. So that's why we're here. That's what Animikii does. This is what drives us every single day, is this statement. I just wanted to highlight two small parts of it that connect to our presentation today. I also wanted to take a moment to reflect on this word reconciliation before we start, because it means so many things to so many people, and so many people don't like that word and have rejected it. And that's acceptable, and that's okay as well. Everything is okay in my world as we head towards a path of better understanding of relationships, reciprocity, and respect. But I did want to center two ideas. One, from the incredible Honorable Marie Sinclair, who I had the chance to work with for 3 years at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Part of that commitment is that we will stand up every year, and we will stand up together and say never again. What we did in this country was wrong, and we will never allow that to happen again. I want us to reflect on that today as we approach the world and all of the things that are happening in it. And two, that the idea of reconciliation is not new. Indigenous people have been reconciling their differences, or attempting to reconcile those differences, in countless negotiations with have categorically not produced the kinds of relationships Indigenous people intended. I wonder how we can reconcile when the majority of Canadians do not understand the historic or contemporary injustice of dispossession and occupation, particularly when the state has expressed an unwillingness to make any adjustments to the unjust relationship. That's written by the absolute incredible traditional knowledge keeper, Leanne Bettismoke-Simpson. So I want to reflect on those two ideas of reconciliation, which are not opposed to one another. They exist in a continuum that is 360 degrees. But today, I want to focus in on respect, relationships, and reciprocity. So if you're thinking and how might we bring this to reality, these are the things that I have to think about every single day when I work at Animikii: respect, relationships, and reciprocity. And the first folks we're going to hear from on this particular front are the incredible Jonathan Forbes and Samantha. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Hello, everyone. We are excited to be recording today with you to share our thoughts on nurturing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities. I want to start with our introductions today. My name is Samantha Tweet. I'm an operations manager at Animikii, and I've been with the company for 4 years. I'm located on traditional and unceded territory of the Lekwungen people. And on my father's side, I am Coast Salish from the Snuneymuxw First Nation from the White family, and on my mother's side, I am Ukrainian. I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan for his introduction.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Forbes, and I am also an operations manager here at Animikii. I've been with the company for a little over 5 years now, working in various management roles. I myself am a Lokwalams member, and Lokwalams is a member of the Tsimshian people up on the north coast of BC. I'm currently also coming to you today from the traditional unceded territory of Algonquin people. Hello.
Thank you, Jonathan. All right, so I want to ask you a bit about how can nonprofit organizations become more culturally competent when working with Indigenous communities? Mm-hmm. And have you worked with settler organizations that are starting out on the right path with this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important aspects that can be considered for engaging with either Indigenous communities or organizations is being really familiar with protocol and what culturally sensitive practices are required for that engagement and relationship building. This is obviously something you can't really do just sort of on your own. So we highly encourage that advice be sought from either Indigenous consultants, advisors, or knowledge keepers. Cultural protocols, practices will vary depending on both the community and the territory that the work is being undertaken on. So it's vital to be aware of what those expectations are to ensure the collaboration is both respectful and reciprocal.
Just going to build on that a bit. What does free, prior, and informed consent mean, and why is that critical when working with nonprofits are working with Indigenous communities?
For sure. Free, prior, and informed consent, otherwise you see it as the acronym of FPIC, is an international human rights standard that allows Indigenous communities to have a say in projects that are affecting their lands, their resources, and their livelihoods. Effectively, it ensures that Indigenous people can give or withhold consent for those project operations and more fully understand what impacts that project has in their territory and whether or not they wish that project to proceed with their consent.
Thank you. So what proactive steps can nonprofits take for redress and restitution in building equitable futures for Indigenous communities?
Really, I would say be informed and research both the community, the territory, and the historical significance of where the project is taking place. Understanding past impacts of actions that have been imposed on Indigenous communities is a huge deal, even to this day. Identifying areas of where harm may have occurred and take corrective measures, which could include apologies, restorative justice, and even reparations of artifacts or even elder remains.
Thank you. Something I feel like we've had a lot of experience with our own partners and our experiences of our partners working in community. Can you share some wise practices you've seen for nonprofits to engage authentically within Indigenous communities?
For sure. The biggest thing for me, and with every successful organization or project that I've seen engaging within community, has always been authentic relationship building. And that means approaching relationships with both humility and, for example, active listening. Indigenous ways of knowing and being is always gentle, respectful, and giving consideration for a different pace, if you will. Understanding the limits of your own understanding as well. The community members, knowledge keepers, and elders are the experts of their own stories. So it's imperative that we listen to what they have to share.
So with that, how can technology serve as a tool for empowering Indigenous-led initiatives and respecting Indigenous data sovereignty in the process?
There are a lot of options available, but I think one of the highlights that emerges in our work is maybe collaborating on technology-driven solutions that address specific challenges to Indigenous communities, such as the digital divide. And if you're not familiar with the digital divide, it's about disparaging access that communities have to high-quality internet, and really sets them apart and leaves certain communities feeling isolated from the rest of the world from a technological standpoint. Further, I would say you could support Indigenous-led programs that aim to preserve cultural heritage and knowledge through digital means, such as language revitalization, libraries, ongoing teaching, that sort of thing.
Thank you so much for sharing with us all your knowledge on this, how to support nonprofits in the Indigenous space.
Of course. Thank you.
Awesome. Jonathan and Samantha are in Haida Gwaii today, working with the BC Museums Association on one of our landmark projects, which is a decolonization and indigenization of cultural institutions in British Columbia project. We are incredibly excited about it. Next up is a little bit about some of the frameworks that we use that Jonathan and Sam were talking about. I'm going to move through this relatively quickly because there's some articles coming up on the TechSoup series that are all about this. So this is just a bit of a small taste for a couple of the things that will be upcoming in that blog series, and we'll make sure this is included in our resource package that we send out as well. First and foremost, our CEO at Animikii, Jeff Ward, teaches every single one of us who are executives, leadership, and who work there as Thunderbirds that instead of doing what Facebook did in the early years, which was move fast and break things, we need to move slow and empower people. So no matter whether we're working with Indigenous organizations or non-Indigenous organizations, we look to ask ourselves, is the technology respectful? Will it provide benefit? Is it appropriate culturally? Is it appropriate for their age? Is it appropriate for the way they're able to access technology? Does the software and will the technology promote wellness? And finally, is it ethical? And that last one is a thing, is a item that we wrestle with constantly. And so as Chief Impact Officer at Animikii, we seek to put, my team seeks to put in place frameworks and ways that we can assess whether technology that we're looking to incorporate within our products or services offering are ethical. Some of that leads to us having a deep understanding of collective rights and responsibilities. And on this front, I just ask for some language changes. This is going to be a tough one. But we talk a lot in the nonprofit world, and I'm on a lot of nonprofit boards, Greenpeace Canada and a few others, talk a lot about stakeholders. And if we think about the idea of stakes and what stakes were for, which is marking out territory and places, it seems a bit odd, seems a bit strange that we would sometimes refer to people who actually hold rights as stakeholders. So I offer this as one point of contemplation within your work. Are there stakeholders, people you'd like to listen to, who are actually rights holders. And then further to that, understanding what that means understanding what has been acknowledged of us in the past. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the TRC's call to action, and of course, the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Calls to Justice all offer clues for many of your organizations. These documents should be foundational to governance policies within the vast majority of nonprofits, whether you're working with Indigenous people or not, because each and every one of these has specific requests that have been made of nonprofit organizations. One of the biggest requests that has been made consistently by Indigenous people since settlers arrived here was sovereignty, was the ability to control their own affairs. And that's really what this next topic is about, but bringing it into the digital realm. I am incredibly excited that we got permission to be able to share this really high impact panel with you. You'll be able to see the whole thing. It's 30 minutes in total, 28 minutes in total. We're going to play the first 10 minutes of it with the first response to Donna Sound's question. And the speakers are Sheila North, who's a distinguished Indigenous advocate and journalist. She previously served as the Grand Chief of MKO in Manitoba. She has been a long-time Indigenous rights advocate and social justice advocate. She has an incredibly strong background in media and in community engagement, and this is her second time taking the collision stage to talk about Indigenous data sovereignty or Indigenous digital sovereignty, a slightly broader topic. You'll also hear from Dr. Alika Lafontaine, who is an award-winning anesthesiologist and groundbreaking leader in Canadian healthcare. He made history as the first Indigenous physician elected as the president of the Canadian Medical Association. And you will hear from Jeff Ward, our CEO at Animikii, who has dedicated over 2 decades of his life now to using technology as a tool for Indigenous empowerment. His unwavering commitment to his social enterprise has led him to being a keynote speaker and board member, and he's a leading thinker in the world of Indigenous data sovereignty. And the moderator is Donna Sound, a journalist at CTV, where she specializes in reporting on Indigenous issues and advocates for equitable media presentation. Please excuse the slightly brash introduction music. I did not choose it.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Hello to the panelists. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, and it's great to see all of you here. And thanks to Collision for having this talk, this most important talk today. First, thank you for the introduction. And with us all being Indigenous, each one of you panelists have very differing backgrounds in your professional lives. So let's start with you, Sheila. What does Indigenous digital sovereignty mean to you?
I think at the heart of it, thank you for having me, by the way, and nice to see everyone here. I think at the heart of it is the fact that Indigenous people have been subjected to having their information taken from them and literally almost never having control of what happens to that information and who gets access to it. But now there's been a rise for the last decade, I would say, of sovereignty at all levels, including digital sovereignty. So it means the ownership and the access of information, digital information of Indigenous people for themselves. The basic concept of nothing about us without us is a huge reminder of what we should be thinking about when we think about Indigenous digital sovereignty.
And Alika, the same question to you. What does Indigenous digital sovereignty mean to you?
Yeah, so in my day job, I'm an anesthesiologist. And one of the things that you realize pretty quick as a doctor is there comes a point for all patients that they actually don't have any control, right? And so when I think about Indigenous data sovereignty, it's taking those situations where people don't have control because they don't control their data or other things and just magnifying it by 10 to 100 times. You know, when you have a patient who comes in who has a history of being mistreated by the hospital, you know, they don't know where their complaints have gone. You know, you have someone who's tried to explain the same situation over and over again to 20 different people because the first 19 couldn't help them with their problem. You know, data sovereignty to me means the ability to take information that's always been yours and use it to make your life better, to help solve your problems.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Jeff?
So I'm a software developer. I run an Indigenous tech company. And so when we think about Indigenous digital sovereignty, yeah, it includes things like connectivity and governance over data. And in particular, with the work that we do with Indigenous communities, you know, a lot has to do with you know, design over the data structures that are about Indigenous peoples, management of data, the governance of that data, and also where that data is stored and collected and housed. I think in this era of, you know, so-called cloud technologies, we have a lot of data flowing through this you know, a lot of these systems. And when it comes to Indigenous data, we really like to think about the intersection of people and communities in data. And, you know, they say data is the new oil. And so when we think about extractive behaviors from colonial entities against Indigenous peoples, we also have to think about sovereignty over our digital footprint as well.
Exactly. Okay, and speaking of data extraction in Indigenous communities, we were talking a little bit backstage about how Indigenous peoples are one of the, if not the most tracked people. Aliga, can you elaborate on that, please? And in terms of, you know, how it relates to everything online now.
Yeah, so I've been president of the Canadian Medical Association, National Voice of Canada's Physicians for the past year. Lots of conversations about data. Data comes up in every single conversation about making healthcare better. And I think when you look at what actually makes it better, it's putting your data in your hands for when you go into different places so people can see what they need to see to solve the problems that you come to them with, right? Like for me as an anesthesiologist, what are the things that I need to see when you come see me? Well, I need to know things about your heart, your lungs, you know, your other organ systems, so I can start to plan out how things should be done in your best interest. And I think what happens with Indigenous data is we collect a ton of it, but then it never goes to the right place. You know, there's reams and reams of data collected on First Nations people from the point that they're born to the point that they are in their lives, and that data doesn't inform better decisions. You know, and so I think when you look at these systems that we've designed, a lot of them are fragmented to benefit the organization, like the hospital or the clinic or the government or other things. They're not really centered around making sure that someone like Sheila can, you know, walk into my office and I can actually give you better care.
Right, right. And anyone else want to?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And at the same time, you know, when we collect data, we think of also statistics. I know that a few years ago when I was working on the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and talking to police forces in Manitoba, including Winnipeg Police at the time and RCMP, they said about 12 years ago that we don't collect data because we treat everyone equally and everyone is important, just as equal. Kind of like people when people say all lives matter, you know, missing the point about that. But when they gave us a list to look at of the names of people that were on this list that were missing or murdered, at the time it was a short list. When they read each name, there was at least 90% of Indigenous names on there. And I pointed that out as a fact, and they said, well, we treat them all the same. But then to me, it was ignoring the obvious that we're unfairly represented and targeted in this space, but also that represents all other spaces that Indigenous people are in. So while, you know, there's fake humility and fake respect that says we treat everyone the same, there is good reasons why we should keep statistics and data information about Indigenous people, because it's important to look forward into the future on making plans and making a better society and community for future generations, including my 3-year-old grandson. I don't want him to have the same hardships that we all have had over the last few decades and years to access anything. So if that could help, but also Indigenous people need to be part of the dissemination and processing of data and digital information about us. And we have to work through those trust issues. We have a lot of mistrust of government, including Stats Canada. I think there's a lot of us on reserves that will speak to Stats Canada at very minimal. We won't tell them the proper information because we're skeptical that they're going to take our information. But at the same time, it's happening already. When you think about all the social media companies like Facebook. Facebook can probably have a good digital printout about what Indigenous people are thinking, seeing, feeling, eating, our cultures, everything. Probably can create a nice profile about us without even us knowing that, that that's possible. So I think it is important, and it has both negative opportunities and challenges.
Okay, so my next question I'm going to pose to you, Jeff, and of course I would like your input as well. We can't talk about Indigenous digital sovereignty without, touching on some Indigenous communities in Canada do not even have connectivity. So, that has to be fixed first. Like, I mean, everyone should be connected and have good connection.
Yeah, and we should also have water that we can drink, and like
exactly.
if you look at what is prioritized as a basic human right, water seems to be like one of the #1 things. And then if you extend that to other services that governments provide, yeah, connectivity was deemed a human right, but at what levels, at what speeds are out there, because yeah, it can unlock a lot of potential, telehealth or other economic opportunities for remote communities, but you need to have that connectivity in the first place. And so yeah, we talk about this digital divide, and when the CRTC says that this is a human rights connectivity, well, guess which communities get left behind to the very end to get connected.
Well, what do we have to do to change that? What needs to happen? What do the leaders in Indigenous communities have to do to change this? And going to tech companies like you to ensure that these. I mean, I know it's not your personal job, but to ensure that everyone is connected.
Well, we need Indigenous people in decision-making positions around connectivity. There's First Nations Technology Council visitors here, for example, out of BC. A lot of amazing groups advocating and making sure that Indigenous voices are heard at these policy decision-making tables. And we're trying to do it from more of from a data perspective, in ensuring that Indigenous data sovereignty principles are woven into like nothing about us without us, making sure that these principles are centered through an Indigenous worldview, so that we're not further extracted from or left behind.
And
awesome. And the rest of that will be sent to y'all in the resource package as well. That conversation continues for a little bit more. It was to a completely standing room audience. There was a lot of interest in this particular topic within the technology space, and I'm excited we could bring it to you. Our next reflections are from Jonathan and Sam, again on the unique process that we use at Animikii called pathfinding.
Sam, so I've got some questions for you today about how Animikii approaches our requirements gathering process called pathfinding, and how we consider it a new approach to software development.
I did that with you.
Awesome. Having been deeply involved in the pathfinding process, what sets it apart for you personally from the more mainstream approaches to software development?
Yes. Okay. So I find for our company, pathfinding really is not a transaction. It's much more of a relationship with our clients or partners. It redefines what partnership is and what the tech space, like what it can look like. Especially for Indigenous organizations, I find we get really deep into the work. We share a lot of stories about what brought us to be in the space together. I find in our pathfinding sessions, we laugh together, we cry together, we do really meaningful work. We really are breathing life into software development. It's really not ticking off boxes, it's about building something meaningful with our partners.
That's awesome. Most companies start with an initial engagement or requirements gathering, but you see now how pathfinding goes well beyond that. Could you share a little bit about how pathfinding is more complex?
Absolutely, yeah. So pathfinding really flips the script. Like instead of just asking what our partners want us to build them, we ask them who they are, what they stand for, and how technology is going to serve those deeper goals. It's not just about what they want the software to look like and what features they want it to have. seen firsthand, it's truly about nothing about us without us. Philosophy is very important here in the work we do. While we're the builders of the tech, our partners really are the ones who have the knowledge and expertise in what they truly need out of the software, and we're there to guide them through that process to figure that out. I always know we're doing really good work when I get chills throughout our pathfinding sessions, and I get to know our partners on a personal level. It's really important that we connect in that way. I think we always leave the space feeling really empowered. Our partners are feeling empowered after our pathfinding sessions, and they're always excited to continue engaging in this work together. And that's where the relationship building really starts.
Thanks. Indigenous technology seems to be a significant focus at Animikii. What does that term mean to you personally?
Yeah, for me, it's really about merging the old with the new, the traditional with the innovative. It helps us find a balanced path that respects both data sovereignty and community ownership. Indigenous technology really means creating tech solutions with courage. It's not about taking the easy way or the most profitable way. It's important we find the path that's best for the Indigenous people who we're building the tech for and generations to follow. So much of the work we do isn't just for the people using it today, it's for important information that's going to be there for many generations to come, and we need to know we're building it so it's going to be there for them when they need it too.
That's awesome. Thank you. The fixed budget and detailed pathfinding report seems to be a game changer for nonprofits. Could you share why this matters so much?
Absolutely. A lot of our partners come to us, sometimes not entirely sure what they need, and we help them determine those needs. But with that, this report, it's a multifaceted gem. It's not just a roadmap. It's part of their business plan. It can be part of their grant application. It's really a blueprint for anyone who wants to breathe life into the project. So, our partners come to us, we do the pathfinding report, we get them to a place where they can take that information, whether it's to the finance department at their organization or it's to the funders who they're going to go to get the money that they need to build the software. It really is that tool for them to take it to the next step forward. And sometimes our partners aren't ready for a couple of years to build software. And when they are ready, we're ready to take that report back and see it back to life. So it really allows them to get as far as they can in the process before going into the software build directly. So yeah, we found it's just been a really important tool for our partners to be able to keep getting closer to their software needs and realizing those goals.
Nice. Incidentally, humility and collaboration form the heartbeat of pathfinding. They shake up. Oh, pause. Sorry, Ian. Here's an edit for you. I'll start over. I skipped lines. Profit sector.
Absolutely, yeah. So I find the beauty in pathfinding is the sharing. The report is not just ours. Our partners could take that to anyone who's going to benefit from it. That's a really radical shift from being competitive to being collaborative. We want our partners to be successful, whether we build the technology or someone else builds the technology. It's important to us that their goals are being achieved, and it's being done in a way where their data needs are being considered and respected in the process. And our report really ensures that whatever they build is going to be built based on their needs and their values. For Animikii, it's not just about looking good on paper. Our values influence every step of the process of development. It fosters a more inclusive and impactful tech ecosystem for nonprofits. We find if we just really center on values, good work will follow, whether it's done by our company or a partner in the community.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your insight today.
Yeah, awesome to meet with you.
Awesome. Again, I'm super excited to see the project that Sam and Jonathan are currently working on with the BCMA. It will be more information available pretty regularly at our website, their website, and on LinkedIn if you'd like to take a look at that, and if that's in the sort of space that you're in. In the about 5 minutes or so that we've got left together, I wanted to share a couple of frameworks with you and share some resources. One of the things that I have found particularly helpful is moving into this space is always and continually asking myself if there's a new way to be approaching a challenge that exists. And at Animikii, we're taught 3 questions regularly. How did I learn this, or how did we learn this? How do I know it to be true? And what other co-truths exist, or what other truths coexist? You know, these three questions are something that our pathfinding team regularly asks out loud to the people that we work with, but this is also something we ask internally of ourselves. So when we're brought a new HR policy or an idea or a way of working, we ask, where did we collectively learn this? How do I personally know it to be true? And what other truths might coexist with this? Sometimes we call those co-truths. What are the co-truths? What other truths exist? Because just because we think one thing about something doesn't mean that we'll continue to think about it that way throughout the entirety of our existence. You know, the incredible Al Admansky, a nonprofit leader, once asked me really boldly, what one thing do you no longer believe that you once firmly and foundationally believed to be true? Now, that shook me, because I thought, wait a minute, if it's foundational, does it ever change? And sure enough, when I started digging deep enough, it does. And these unlearning questions are very helpful. But we need more than just unlearning questions. We need some meat. We need some things to think about. How might we, as Animikii, as an organization, decolonize the workplace, think about business in different ways, de-center white ways of working, Western ways of working? How could we rethink cultural policies, board diversity policies, and put in new programs to really support our incredibly diverse team? You know, so a few of the things that we have done and we want to share with you are available at open.animikii.com, where we have put in place substituting statutory holiday policy, because let's face it, a lot of statutory holidays are incredibly colonial in their nature. And the ability to be able to move these around could be very important for people from all different cultures. We have a board diversity policy there that mandates Animikii to have 50% women or non-binary people on our board and 50% Indigenous people. And we've provided the language there. So if that's something you want to do within your organization, there's a bit of a language template there. We also put in place community love days, where we have 7 days a year, one for each of the values, that folks are able to head home to their family, wherever that is, up the street, somewhere a little bit further away. We often pair them, almost always we pair them with long weekends. So if we have the Monday off, we'll add a love day on the Friday, adding just a little bit of extra time for travel and to be able to be reconnected to your kin. And that's really where our thinking about bereavement leave also came in. We really rethought how so many organizations limit this amount of leave. They limit who, they strictly identify who family is. As a queer person, you know, we brought in the idea of chosen family, which is also, you know, I then found out from my Indigenous colleagues, something that really resonated with them as well. And cultural leave and extended family leave for your chosen kin is also something that we've extended. So cultural leave is also really interesting, not just for Indigenous cultural practices, but all cultural practices. So folks are able to take time off and have their job back if they need an extended amount of time to be able to take off to undertake ceremony or other cultural obligations. Those are just a few of the things that we're doing because we're constantly asking ourselves questions. You are probably reading our collaboration right now. We're all the way up to number 5, I believe, which is all about pathfinding. We've got a couple more coming out, and you may have more questions about all of that. So we want to continue to collect your questions. Here's the QR code and the place that you can drop them off. Again, as you're reading any one of these resource documents, as you're digging into those calls to action, as you are questioning your current place in that reconciliation, truth and reconciliation space, feel free to ask us these questions. And we'll bring it to the entire team of 35 plus team members at Animikii, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and we'll all give you our thoughts and opinions. If you don't have a question, we've also given you the chance to just give us your email address. We'll only use it once to share these resources with you, but feel free to sign up there as well. So thank you so much, Kiara. I really appreciate it. I think we're just at time, and I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we have about 5 minutes left